Ahoy and welcome back to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself some tea, and let's get started. Today's video will be going over all of the books that I read in June. Yeah, we're July right now. Yeah, June. And since June is Pride Month, I tried to focus on LGBTQ plus books and was mostly successful. So yeah, and also, yes, this is a wig. I didn't feel like dealing with my hair today. So let's get into it. So, the first book that I read in June was Nevermoor, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. It is a middle grade fantasy, and it is about Morrigan Crow, who is a cursed child, which means that every single thing that goes wrong in her little town gets blamed on her. It also means that she is fated to die on her 11th birthday. However, on what is supposed to be the last day of her life, she is whisked away to a magical world called Nevermoor by an eccentric man named Jupiter North. This book was so incredibly charming and whimsical and heartwarming and just... It is absolutely on the comfort reads list and actually might be added to my favorites list. I really enjoyed it. It's Harry Potter, but without any of the problematic elements. The characters are so rich and vibrant, and I love them, all of them. Jupiter especially, he's a delight. But Morrigan holds a very special place in my heart because she's been told her entire life that she is a problem and that she is the cause of so many terrible things, and she spends this whole book trying to unlearn that, and it's so hard for her, but her emotional journey through the book is just so lovely to watch as she finally gets her own little family that loves her and treats her right. It's my heart. Ow! I don't really know what else to say about it other than reading this book made me feel like everything was going to be okay. So needless to say, I guess, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This tea is I made it too hot, so I'm gonna put it down until it's cooled down a little bit, and I guess I'll just have to figure out what to do with my noodle arms in the meantime. But anyway, the next book I read was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Saenz. It is a YA LGBTQ plus coming of age story. It follows 2 boys, Aristotle, or Ari? Probably Ari. Even though it makes more sense for it to be Ari because Aristotle. It seems more natural for me to say Ari, so I'm going to call him Ari, and Dante. They meet during the beginning of one summer, and we follow them as their friendship grows, and they each learn important truths about themselves and their lives. I wasn't a huge fan of this book, to be honest. I really wanted to like it, but unfortunately, yeah, it didn't hit me the way I wanted it to. Big part of that, I think, was the writing. The writing is very choppy, which I initially thought it was a stylistic choice to show us how Ari thinks because it's told exclusively from his perspective. But then all the other characters speak in the same choppy way, and it's very jagged, and so I don't understand if it's supposed to be, if it was a stylistic choice or not. Another thing is that the characters tend to speak in this very circular, roundabout way, and it's very repetitive. So I'll read you an example. This is a conversation between Ari and Dante. It bothers you that you're Mexican, doesn't it? No. Yes, it bothers me. I don't know. Yeah, it bothers you. You know what I think, Ari? I think Mexicans don't like me. That's a weird thing to say. Weird. It's just, I don't know, it just doesn't flow, and it doesn't necessarily have to flow. Not every book needs to be written, like a painting, as I usually say. That's fine. It's just all of the characters speak like this. And it was very strange. And like, as a writer, I often use repetition as a stylistic choice, and now I'm worried that all of my writing sounds like this. But really, the writing style is kind of the only thing that bothered me. Otherwise, I liked the story and I liked the characters. Initially, I thought we didn't really get a lot from Ari, but as the story goes on, you realize that Ari is repressing a lot of things and he's hiding a lot of things from even himself, so it kind of started to make sense. So I guess if you don't mind really jagged, repetitive, clunky writing, then try it out. If you're looking for a queer love story between two teenage boys, it's here for you. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up was A Light from Uncommon Stars by Ryka Aoki. This is an adult sci-fi fantasy. This tells the story of 3 women whose lives intersect. They are Shizuka Satomi, a world-renowned violin teacher who made a deal with the devil to offer the souls of 7 violin prodigies in exchange for her own. Katrina Nguyen, a young transgender runaway whose sole possession is her beloved violin. And Lan Tran, bear with me, former starship captain and refugee from an intergalactic war who runs a donut shop with her family. There are so many wild things going on in this book that should not work together, and yet somehow they do. There's the world of violin competitions, demons, space aliens trying to create a Stargate out of the giant donut statue outside their donut store. These should not be able to coexist, and yet somehow they fit. So I will say that this book is objectively very good. I think objectively it's very good. It didn't hit quite as hard as I would have expected it to, and I can't pinpoint exactly why that was. But I still think it's very good. I just didn't love it with every fiber of my being, you know? I did think the characters were excellent, though. I really liked the characters. All 3 of the main women, amazing. And I thought the story was really fun, but tinged with an appropriate amount of gravitas for some of the subject matter. I would recommend it if it sounds like something that's up your alley. Especially if you're looking for a book with trans rep. But I don't know, it wasn't a knockout for me personally, but I do still recommend it. And I also gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Comfort Me with Apples by Catherynne M. Valente. I immediately said that in the French way. I don't know if she actually pronounces it Valente or if it's Valente or Valente. I'm gonna stick with Valente for now, and somebody can maybe correct me or not. Anyway, Comfort Me with Apples is a horror novella. It's very, very short. So it follows Sophie, and Sophie's life is perfect. Her house is perfect. Her husband is perfect. Her neighbors are perfect. Everything is perfect, and she just couldn't be happier. Sure, her husband is away at work a lot, and the neighbors won't answer her questions, and she's never allowed to enter their locked basement. But it's okay, because everything is perfect, isn't it? So this was very creepy. It had a really nice juxtaposition of beautiful writing and like beautiful descriptive imagery, immediately followed by something very disturbing. There are lots of like clever little hints strewn throughout it for the big reveal at the end. And I don't want to say too much more about it because it is very short and I don't want to spoil it. But it's just a very nice, quick, spooky read. It's like 100 pages long. So yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5. Next up, I read Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Alire Saenz, which is the sequel to Aristotle Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the world. So again, it's a YA contemporary. And this one follows Ari and Dante as their relationship grows, and they learn to navigate how to be two young gay men in a world that is very hostile to them. So I wasn't in love with the first book, but I decided to give the sequel a try, and it just confirmed that this series is just not for me. I don't think there's going to be another one anyway, but I just didn't vibe with it. Although I will say that the choppy writing has lessened a lot, but the characters still don't really talk like real people, and that really bothered me. They all have this very elevated way of speaking, which is very strange coming from a bunch of teenagers. And they'll just go into a monologue about their feelings at the drop of a hat. All of the characters, again, same with the first one, all of the characters kind of speak in the same way. Like, they all use the same vocabulary, they all have the same speech patterns. It's a little distracting. One thing that I enjoyed reading through, I don't know if enjoyed is the right word for this, but Ari has a lot of internalized homophobia that he is working through, and watching him work through that was quite cathartic, I thought. Another thing this book has in common with the first one is that there is a lot of repetition, but whereas in the first one it was more so characters repeating themselves as they were speaking, this one has a lot of repetition of words and ideas that keep popping up sporadically. There are a lot of things in this book that are brought up, pondered, and then dropped. And sometimes they get picked up again very briefly later on, but often not. None of them are quite dealt with in a very satisfying way. Some things include the AIDS crisis, because this takes place in America in the 80s. Racism against Mexicans in the United States, and homophobia in the church. The AIDS crisis through line is probably the one that gets the most delved into, and is the only one that has like a little bit of a satisfying ending. Or maybe not a satisfying ending, but you know, it gets wrapped up at least a little bit. Oh no, I just don't think this series is really for me. But if you're looking for, again, if you're looking for a series about two gay teenagers learning to love each other in a very hostile world, then I would pick this up. This one I gave 3 out of 5 stars. Oh, that was another thing. This book did not feel necessary. In an author's note, he says that he left a lot of things unfinished or unsaid in the first book, so he wanted to write a sequel, and personally I didn't find that to be the case, so I didn't really see a necessity for a sequel, but that's also coming from somebody who didn't love the first one, so take that with a grain of salt, I guess. Next up was Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. This is an adult historical fiction / mythology retelling. We follow Kaikeyi, who is born as the only daughter in the kingdom of Kaikeyi. Growing up, she hears all these stories about the might and the benevolence of the gods, but she herself has never had a single prayer answered. Her entire worth is reduced to how good of a marriage alliance she can make, and in her desperation to find just the tiniest bit of independence, she goes searching through some ancient scrolls where she unlocks an ancient magic. Using this magical power, she's able to elevate herself from a helpless princess into a respected, powerful, diplomatic warrior queen who makes the world better for the other women in her kingdom. However, when the evil from her childhood stories threatens her world, the path that she's forged clashes with the will of the gods, and Kaikeyi must decide if her resistance is worth it and what kind of legacy she wants to leave behind. So this book is a backstory retelling of Kaikeyi from the Ramayana, which I wasn't very familiar with before going in. I knew a little bit about it, but not too much, and that didn't impact my enjoyment of this book a lot. I'll say it right now, I love this book a lot, but I've since looked into it. So for those who are interested, the Ramayana is a very long, epic tale about the life of Rama, who is a prince, but also an avatar of the god Vishnu. The legend follows Rama as he grows, and a notable point is when he's on the verge of being crowned, but his stepmother Kaikeyi uses a boon and requests that he be exiled for 14 years so that Kaikeyi's son Bharata can instead be crowned. Patel mentions in the beginning of this book that very little characterization is given to Kaikeyi outside of a jealous woman or someone who's being manipulated by others around her, and she wanted to give a voice to Kaikeyi. She wanted to give Kaikeyi a voice for herself, which I think is fantastic. I love it when people do that. The storytelling in this is beautiful. So many quotes on my copy compared it to Circe by Madeline Miller, and I think that's a very apt comparison. I think both books kind of have a similar vibe and are both very, very good. So, but yeah, Patel did a great job at exploring Kaikeyi's emotions and her thoughts throughout the book and just really pull you into the story. You watch this woman who is constantly overlooked carve out a space for herself by her fingernails, essentially. And you watch her fight for the rights of the women around her and build such beautiful things only to have them undone in the blink of an eye. And it was devastating and shockingly topical for the time I was reading it, which was incredibly heartbreaking and very frustrating. I was reading this in like the middle to end of June of 2022, so look up what happened around then if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But anyway, I would really, really, really recommend this book. It might be the best book I've read this year so far. Oh, and as a bonus, Kaikeyi is asexual, so yeah. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. You know, this is my first time wearing this lipstick, and I don't think I like it. But it was a gift, so you gotta try it on at least once. And finally, the last book that I read in June was One for All by Lillie Lainoff. This is a YA historical fiction / retelling. It is a gender-bent retelling of The Three Musketeers, in which a girl with chronic illness trains as a musketeer, and along the way she discovers secrets, sisterhood, and self-love. So I think overall this book is really enjoyable. I think a lot of people will like it, and I will definitely recommend it to people. I think for me, the problem that I had was more of a marketing one. So I feel like the marketing misled me and is the reason why I have some mixed feelings about it. Let me explain. So it takes a little while for the plot to kick off, which wouldn't have bothered me because I was really enjoying the build-up. But the description on the dust jacket mentions a specific character, and I was about 200 pages in when I realized that this character had yet to even be mentioned, and then I started to feel like it was dragging. So yeah, that was just unfortunate. That was just unfortunate on the dust jacket part. The other thing was that I found this book on a list of, it was like a list of like LGBTQ plus book recommendations for the month of June. And since I wanted to focus on, you know, queer stories for Pride Month, I picked it up. However, when I find a book on an LGBTQ plus book recommendation list, or if a book is described to me as being an LGBTQ plus book, I have one of two expectations. One, that the story focuses on an LGBTQ plus story, meaning that queerness plays an intrinsic role in the plot or in the characters. Like, it is a book about being queer or about these queer characters. So for example, like Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. The protagonist is an ace character and the book is about her ace journey, essentially, or how her relationships are viewed through her asexuality. Or The Song of Achilles is about Patroclus and Achilles' relationship. Or two, the main character is queer, but the story doesn't necessarily include that throughout the plot. It may be mentioned a few times and, you know, talked about, but it's not intrinsic to the plot. So, for example, a book like Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi is an asexual woman, and that is touched upon, but it doesn't affect the plot in any way. I also wrote down as an example Picture Us in Light, which I'm not sure if that counts, because the main character in that is queer, and his queerness is touched upon a lot. But the story itself revolves more around family matters, and that's more of a subplot, I would say. So yeah, I think it works as an example. So yeah, those are my one of two expectations. One for All, however, does have LGBTQ plus characters, but they're not the main characters, and their queerness is barely touched upon until the end, or like the last third, probably less than that, like the last quarter of the book. It's a very, very small subplot, which is absolutely fine. And if I had been reading this as a gender bent, what's it called? Three Musketeers retelling, and there just happened to be these queer characters, I would have been like, oh, nice, that's a pleasant surprise. But I was reading this primarily as an LGBTQ plus story that happened to be a retelling of the Three Musketeers. So my expectations were not met. So I think that's maybe why I didn't feel as strongly about this as I would have in other circumstances, because I do think it is a very good story. I did enjoy the story, and I did enjoy the characters. I really liked the characters, actually, especially our main character, Tanya. She spends her whole life being relegated to being the sick girl, and the book really explores how that has impacted how she sees herself and how others see her. And I really loved that there's a book with a chronically ill main character who is still a very strong character, and who faces a lot of extra trials because of her illness, but ultimately decides that she can be more than just her illness, and that like her illness will always be a part of her, but it's not all of her. So yeah, I really enjoyed those aspects, and I thought the writing was quite nice. So, you know, all in all, I do recommend this book. Just go in knowing that it's, I wouldn't say it's an LGBTQ plus book. It is a good book with a little bit of queer rep. And hopefully you'll have a better experience than I did. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is a common theme for this month, apparently. And those are all the books that I read in June. I would love to hear your thoughts on them down in the comments. Did you like any of them? Are there any that you'd like to pick up? Let me know. I'd love to talk about them. And you can find me on Instagram at Leia Like the Princess, where you can also find my little store at Moonlit Cat Creations, or you can go directly to its website at moonlitcatcreations.com. And yeah, stay cozy.